Hello everybody, welcome back to the Premier Injuries channel. We're going to be talking through all the injuries in the Premier League, but just before we get started, I'm going to show you where you can find out all the most up-to-date information, which is the Premier Injuries website. Also make sure to hit that subscribe button so you're always up to date, because at the moment it's pretty crazy. And Ben, for you, it is ridiculously so. How are you doing? I always like to just have that human side, because you appear a machine on here. You're such a fountain of knowledge, but you do have blood in your veins. You've got thoughts and feelings. How are you coping with this kind of crazy schedule at the moment?
I thought I was coping all right until I seen the camera, and I actually look like I'm absolutely haggard. I do feel a bit tired. The quick turnaround doesn't help, but we're on top of it. We're getting there. We've just had another 4 press conferences within the last hour. So again, as always, the caveat, this isn't the finished document that we will be referring to. It'll get updated as soon as we come off this live stream. I'm literally just off Brendan Rodgers' Leicester City press conference. And of course, we've had Jurgen Klopp, Gary O'Neill, Thomas Frank, all in the last hour. So it's been busy on top of everything else. But
Yeah.
good.
I mean, this is the thing as well that we always say, keep up to date with this live stream. This is going to be the most up to date until maybe you tweet, maybe you have some more insights before the start of the game week. But this is as close as you're going to get. And this is why we always say as well, keep your transfers for as long as possible, because anything can happen. Somebody could get injured in trading. Something could happen off the pitch that we're not even aware about. But as you mentioned, we're on the FF Hub website looking through your predicted lineups page, and we're going to start off with Game Week 12's Bournemouth team. So yeah, what's the insight there, Ben? Any news that people should be aware of? I think the big one that's attracting attention that we're not so into is Dominic Solanke.
Yeah, we have heard from interim boss Gary O'Neill. The Cherries going to looking to make it 7 unbeaten. We've went on that run since that 9-0 massacre against Liverpool at Anfield. So, it's a difficult one to call because it is a quick turnaround. But of course, he wants to continue that momentum. With regards to team news, there are no fresh injury concerns. The only player who will be pushing to be included could be Ben Pearson. He's a player that picked up a knee injury during that defeat at Anfield. So that might be the only changes to the squad. We have seen 1 or 2 minor tweaks in recent weeks, but nothing major from the interim boss. So again, it may be that Bournemouth are relatively unchanged, and it may be that third game in this week where we see the biggest number of changes. And by the way, that's what we do tend to see. That's what we've seen with the first set of midweek fixtures this season. We've seen, the glut of those changes coming later on, that third game in the week, whereas those midweek fixtures, squads were fairly static. We only seen 2 and 3 changes here and there, not massive amounts of movement in personnel.
Yeah, and so this is something to keep an eye on as well. I mean, is there a few players that you think with each team, I guess we could highlight, are going to transcend those fixtures? They're going to play anyway, or do you think that at the moment, especially with the World Cup coming up, there's going to be an eye on that, and so all managers are going to think every player could have some sort of minutes managed over the coming game weeks?
Just in terms of domestic football and domestic management, they will not be eyeing up that World Cup. Absolutely not. Their priority remains with their club. So in terms of managing players and the decisions they make with regards to setup and minutes, that will all be done with one eye on their own team and their upcoming domestic fixtures. Nothing to do with what will happen at that World Cup in Qatar. For the players, that's a slightly different matter. And it was a question I was just asked literally 5 minutes ago. How do I think this impact, the World Cup will start impacting on players, and will they maybe start easing back? And I certainly think the injuries to Diego Jota and Richarlison, particularly of this weekend, will have those players maybe, take a step back and have a little bit of a think and evaluate, how they go out and perform maybe over the coming game weeks, because quite rightly so, this is the biggest stage. It's the pinnacle of most players footballing careers, and they want to play and they want to be involved in that tournament. On the flip side to that, There are other players who are maybe on the fringes of their national team squad, and they'll be wanting to go out and make, have some statement performances between now and that cut-off. Close to home for me, one of those players I think would be Callum Wilson, and that's why I'm confident including him in my fantasy team, because he's got something to aim for, he's got something to play for. It's not like he cannot afford to ease back. We know he's had his injury problems, but ultimately you've got to go hard, otherwise you're staying at home.
Yeah, it's a very good point, and we have discussed this many times with Raj as well, the risk-reward situations. People can check out those videos. But we're going to move on to the Gunners, Arsenal. So they don't have a game week 12, do they? It's blank, so let's move on from them. Aston Villa is the next one up.
Yeah, we got Danny Ings in our starting 11 at the weekend. That was long overdue. However, didn't exactly, reap the reward Steven Gerrard wanted. Although that Villa first half performance in particular was very impressive. It was an inspired performance by the visiting goalkeeper Kepa to keep them at bay. Again, just a few sort of personnel changes in terms of freshening it up. Maybe Coutinho, maybe Buendia coming back in. Tyrone Mings was spotted limping heavily towards the end of that match, rolled his ankle. However, he did play that down post-match, so that's why we have him starting in that Villa lineup. Had this game been a little bit of a quicker turnaround, of course, this one's played on Thursday night, then maybe make question marks over Matty Cash. He's just returning off that hamstring issue. But because, you have those days clear, then I'm fairly confident he will be around. But maybe looking at the game week 13, that's something that we'll have to follow Steven Gerrard for. See if he comes through those 90 minutes. And then maybe is he consideration for, like I say, playing that third game within the space of that week might be a little bit too much of a risk.
Yeah, and as well, game week 12 and game week 13 could be the proof of the pudding, or kind of an evaluation of Gerrard, if he'll be there anymore. I think it's going to be a big couple of weeks for him. The pressure's on for him and the whole of the team to kind of perform at the moment. Jandre does actually want to go back to the Arsenal news. He wants to know, is there any Zinchenko updates?
Nothing firm or official from the club in terms of an update. Of course, we will hear from Mikel Arteta on Wednesday, and the reason of their Premier League postponement against Manchester City, if you didn't already know, it's because they have a Europa League tie against PSV to play. That was the initial postponement came around. I don't know if it was the Queen's death or the announcement that she had been taken seriously ill, but that's why that fixture was originally postponed. So yeah, we'll expect something maybe in the build-up to that. Although in recent times, Mikel Arteta has been very coy with regards to his team. He was keeping his cards very close to his chest. However, you look at the performances of Tomiyasu, who surprisingly had got the nod over Kieran Tierney in the league. And, he eases that pressure and he eases that burden. And yeah, we've seen these ongoing calf problems for Zinchenko. So, maybe those performances will allow him just to take that a little bit extra in terms of his recovery, and then, ease back in gently as opposed to being thrown back in to that starting 11.
So let's continue with the analysis. We're going to move on to Brentford. As always, we kind of say Ivan Toney's the kind of main player that you want in the team. But is there any kind of changes to the 11 which may improve his chances of getting some goals?
Yeah, I've made a couple of changes from the win over Brighton. Of course, there's a long recovery time for this, and this will come down to whether Thomas Frank wants to freshen his side with one eye on game week 13, or as managers always tend to say, we'll take one game at a time. However, I've brought in Lewis Potter. He's recovered from a foot problem. That would mean that Wissa makes way. But again, there's not too much between those two players. Also, Baptiste and De Silva. I'd also like to see a little bit more of maybe Damsgaard, the summer signing for the Denmark international. Hasn't had much of a look in. However, he is fully up to speed in terms of his match fitness and that sharpness. And he is another player who could potentially come into that starting 11.
So just for people who are putting comments in there, we will get to some of them, but we're going through the teams alphabetically. So some people have asked, about maybe Mason Mount or Alexander-Arnold. We will get on to those questions, but we're just going to do it for ease as well, because some people, when they watch this back, they'll want to know, oh, I'm going to skip to the Brighton bit, which is what we're going on to now with Brighton and Hove Albion. They played quite well under new manager De Zerbi, but can they continue this? And you put Undav up front, Ben. Is this because of the rotation risk of Danny Welbeck?
Exactly that, Jason. We've seen Undav come off the bench on Friday night, and he may be poised for his first Premier League start. Had it been Graham Potter, then I would have been fairly confident that Danny Welbeck comes out of that starting 11. Under the new boss, you can't be 100% certain. We know historically the injury problems that he has, and therefore, playing games in quick succession has always been difficult. So Graham Potter was always one to protect Danny Welbeck. And maybe Undav, like I say, deserves his opportunity to shine. I mean, elsewhere within that Seagulls lineup, he did come out, the new manager did come out and he said that Alan Lallana will be given his first start under his stewardship. Who makes way exactly? Again, we're not entirely sure. We're still getting the feelers out. I did do a little bit of research before he joined the club, and he did like the setup in a 4-2-3-1. So maybe, I think, if I've actually took Pascal Gross out, which I'm not 100% locked in, that's if he goes with that 3-1. But he could play Lallana a little bit deeper, which means that either McAllister or Caicedo would drop out. The only other potential change that I did see was with Cairo Maitoma maybe coming in at left back, but he rolled his ankle. He left the GTEC Stadium on crutches with his foot in a protective boot. So that means Estupian. If I'm you will comment, I know you'll comment, but we still have him starting at left back.
We've got a couple of questions actually about Leandro Trossard. Are there rumours, or is there any truth to this that he's a doubt? We've got a couple of questions on that.
Look, I've had questions from people saying two different rumours. One is that Leandro Trossard was going to be deployed as a left wing back, and secondly, that there were slight concerns with regards to his fitness. And of course, no official line. And as far as I'm aware, I'm certainly not. I don't have any knowledge of any kind of injury or problem at this moment in time with regards to Trossard. So I cannot give you anything definitive on that. I can only tell you, the current state of play as I fully understand it at the moment.
I've got him in my team as well, so I'm hoping that he's fine, because that would be a real big blow, because I kind of manoeuvred my team so that I had a few players to cover the Manchester City and Arsenal absentees for this game week. But we're going to move it on to Chelsea. We do have some questions on them as well, but let's go with your headliner news before we get into the listener questions.
So a few changes. We know that Graham Potter isn't afraid to mix things up. I think it was 7 changes against Wolves back in game week 11. That may have been after the Champions League, and that threw everybody's plans into total disarray. And again, I've went for changes, but not wholesale like we seen last time. Thiago Silva complained of a bit of tightness in his hamstring after the win at Villa Park. Now, he is fine injury-wise, but again, we're talking about a 38-year-old veteran defender who needs to be managed. And with Koulibaly on the bench, that's why I brought him in. We've seen Marco Cucurella come off, I think it was at half-time at the weekend. Whether it was a little bit of a tactical switch, but also that might have been with one eye on the fact that Ben Chilwell, who's returning off that long-term knee injury, again, might not be involved. So that's why I have Cucurella starting, Conor Gallagher coming in, and also Azpilicueta on the right-hand side. And I'm hopeful, because I brought him into my team, that we have Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang starting. He came off fairly early at Villa Park, so that, maybe that was an indication of, like I say, we want to protect him. Hopefully it wasn't too much about his performance. It does mean, however, that we don't have any Kai Havertz in the team. Mason Mount, I think he's the most transferred in player of this round. There were slight doubts ahead of that Villa game on his fitness. He went for a scan on a thigh problem. That was found to be just a minor issue. Of course, he was cleared, he started, and he scored twice. Again, I have Mason Mount, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed here. I'm just hoping that Graham Potter doesn't want to protect him for this one, and once again, he starts.
I think an interesting thing with Mason Mount as well is the kind of looking at the heat maps, Aubameyang was much further back, and him and Sterling were the kind of furthest forward players, which again benefits, looking at his data from since Potter's come in, and Chelsea's data as a whole. The attacking nature of the team has really, really improved. In fact, since Graham Potter's become manager, the team have the third most shots inside the box of all teams. So, it's looking improved. I think that was one of the things under Tuchel which was very disappointing. But yeah, so many questions were about Mason Mount. Will he be rested? Are you confident then that he's going to play?
I wouldn't say confident. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. Like I say, I'm a Mason Mount owner. There's two things which are going against. One is just the Graham Potter, the Pep-esque rotation policy that he seems to have implemented, and secondly, that niggling thigh problem. Now, we have had clearance from Potter to say that everybody came through the game at the weekend unscathed. It will just be about managing those players and managing those minutes. Ideally, another 2 goals, another 40, 50, 60-minute display, and then whip them off for me.
Samir Ramani, I hope I haven't butchered that one. We've got a tendency to do that, Ben. Maybe just me though. He's asked, hopefully we can talk about Reece James replacements for this game week. He's going to be out probably until the World Cup, maybe until after. Is there any kind of players that jump out as you as set players that will start every game week? Because obviously we could talk about the people that are going to get lots of points, but for me and for you, quite often it's those players that are actually going to start each game week without risk.
Yeah, I mean, look, to be honest, I threw a couple out there when I spoke about this on Friday. Eric Dyer, not the flashiest of players, but defensively, Antonio Conte's got it going on, doing really, really well. And he's a player that, if you're looking at our Tottenham backline, then he's certainly ahead of the Romeros of this world, or the Davies, or the Perisic, or the Dohertys, in terms of who's going to be nailed down or close to a nail on into that starting 11. I also flagged up a player in the Crystal Palace backline, given their fixture swing. And again, I know we're looking at highly differential players, but these are like low ownership but low budget, low values, but not necessarily low quality. And I did look at Tyreek Mitchell and I thought, should I, shouldn't I? I actually went for Joachim Andersen, because I just seen him more as that nail starter and for minutes. And it actually turned out on Saturday, that was the case when Tyreek Mitchell was, in line for that clean sheet, but was hauled off fairly early doors. So Anderson, for me, he offers that threat from set pieces, and also he can ping a few. He's got a lovely touch on him. And it wouldn't surprise me if he does pick up 1 or 2 assists, before the end of the season.
One player that maybe I want to put in, but just with a question mark because of maybe competitive minutes and also his age, Aaron Cresswell. We've seen previous seasons really good creative force. The way that West Ham play, they're quite aerial threats, and so he has those crosses in and they can score from them. But would Emerson kind of be a threat at all? We won't go too much into that because we're going to cover West Ham in a bit. But what do you think on that on terms of guaranteed minutes, or would you go with another West Ham defender?
Yeah, that would be my concern with Cresswell. Just given his injury history, he's a player that does tend to see a lot of the treatment room over the course of a season, a lot of muscular problems, groin, hamstring issues in the past. And of course, when you've got somebody like Emerson there waiting in the wings, then it makes sense that David Moyes will look to protect those players and rotate. He does have injury concerns throughout that back line at the moment, which we will touch upon. Zuma, Dawson. So Cresswell, like I say, I do like him. I think he does bring a lot, but there's always that nagging doubt in the back of your mind when those fixtures are close together. Will he actually be nailed down for a start?
You've mentioned them already, Crystal Palace. What is the team news there? And you've taken part in the rotation up front. It's now Mateta who's leading the line for game week 12.
I mean, you see Mateta, I see Matata. Let's call the whole thing off, Jason. Do you know how long I've been waiting to say that? Look, I've had a few questions with regards to this. Odsonne Edouard, I had to check back over the again those previous midweek fixtures, and it was a switch that Patrick Vieira had made there. Edouard has started every game since the international break, so maybe is due a little bit of a rest. I know he has been on the scores, got himself a couple of goals on the score sheet in recent weeks, but that never seems to bother Patrick Vieira. He has flip-flopped between the two, although, Edouard seems to be the first choice. The other change as well, also from the weekend, bringing Elise back in. I just see Villa playing more, playing more on the front foot at Selhurst Park, as opposed to maybe, at the weekend where they didn't want to offer that attacking threat going forward and maybe play a little bit more conservative style. So that's why I've got Elise back in that team.
Jandre has got a good suggestion for your next kind of Crystal Palace related dad joke. He says, Hakuna Matata.
It's it. I'll give a C plus.
C plus. Oh, well, we're going to move from that wonderful joke. I give that A star, Jandre. I love it. Let's move to Everton. What's the news there?
The Toffees heading up to St James's Park. Again, not expecting massive amount of changes from Frank Lampard. Doesn't really have that strength in depth. Players that you may expect to come in or potentially push would be the likes of maybe Tom Davies, but who do you drop? I can't see Idrissa Gueye or Onana making way. We do have Anthony Gordon coming in. He sat out the last game due to suspension, where Dwight McNeil. Certainly, we're not expecting Dominic Calvert-Lewin to be pushing for a start just yet. We know he's had that lengthy injury problems, and Frank Lampard has spoken about, he needs to optimize his time in training before he can be considered for that. And we're just not there yet in terms of that overall sharpness and match fitness.
Tunji has sent a message. Is Eze a definite starter now?
Look, he's got the quality, he's been delivering, and he's a player that has been maybe flagged as a potential outsider for the England World Cup squad in Qatar. So we talk about players who are highly motivated and want to push on and have something to prove, and Eze certainly falls into that category. I would say no player, or the majority of players in most squads during this period, were not able to guarantee any starts. Like I say, lots of influence and factors, lots of strength and depth. And I think what works in his favour at the minute, Palace are carrying a few problems in midfield. I think MacArthur's out, Nathan Ferguson's out. So, there just isn't, there may be a lack of competition in there. And we've seen Jeffrey Sloop, who's coming in recent weeks, who could potentially move across onto that left-hand side. But for me, Eze deserves his start. He deserves his place. He's a young lad, and therefore he certainly starts midweek.
We've got a question from John Ray. Is Patterson back before the World Cup?
Are we talking Nathan Patterson, Everton, I'm presuming?
Yeah.
Yeah, so ideally, if he stays on his current trajectory, that timeline, we're expecting a return in and around that beginning November. So may have a couple of games under his belt before that World Cup. Initial timeline was maybe around that 4 to sort of 5 weeks, potentially up to 6. But barring any kind of reaction or setback, then I'm certainly fairly confident that we will see Patterson before we break for Qatar.
Tim Y has asked the pronunciation on Onana. Is it Onana, or Onana? I mean, Onana, what's his name, Ben?
Yes.
Just yes.
Yeah. Yes, that's his name. That is his name.
Fulham, what is the injury situation there?
Injury situation? Well, we haven't heard from Marco Silva as it currently stands. Players who are potentially pushing or who have included in this week's starting 11 have Willian coming back in at the expense of Daniel James. That was a calf problem, returned to the matchday squad at the weekend. The wheels have come off slightly for Fulham in recent weeks. Mitrovic, was he a surprise starter at the weekend? Well, it depends on who you want to believe, but Mitrovic, by his own admission, still isn't 100%. Still feeling that foot problem, but of course, his importance to that Fulham side cannot be understated. So that's why he continues to start for Marco Silva's men. There was maybe one surprise with regards to centre back. We've seen Tosin dropped for Diop. I've got Tosin back. That was just a tactical switch, nothing major. And of course, we're still waiting for the return of Kenny Tete at right back, and that could potentially release Kadora Reed to move back onto the left-hand side where we have Cabano. But like I say, for now, it looks as if Kenny Tete is just going to be a little bit short.
So we're getting lots of questions about pronunciations. Chris has actually asked any news on Kulevetsky, as he has spelt it for you, Ben. We're going to get to Tottenham a little bit later. First of all, we're going to focus on another team that play in white, Leeds United. Bamford, I mean, does he keep his place in the team? But Rodrigo was pretty poor as well. He led to that Arsenal goal. Who is going to lead the line there?
I have included Bamford, and yes, you're right. And I think it was you that flagged up and highlighted the fact that despite his limited minutes this season, he actually tops the Premier League charts for the most big chances missed at 8. On the plus side, we'll take the positive spin on this. He's getting himself into those positions, and he is a focal point of that Leeds attack, something which they'd missed. And yes, he missed the penalty, and yes, he should have had a goal, but he did help change the dynamic of that game for Leeds. And I think there's enough encouragement there for Jess March to release Patrick Bamford and start him on this game week. It is at the expense of Rodrigo. Maybe he's struggling to find his pre-injury form, having a foot coming back off that shoulder problem. The only other change that I have included in this Leeds lineup is at right back, and I have removed Christensen, although it is a big call. I've brought Luke Ayling in. I just think he offers what he lacks going forward when compared to Christensen. He certainly brings, in terms of his defensive qualities, that fortitude and just that, that passion and that love for playing for that Leeds team. So that's why he's back in there.
And I think as well, it's a good opportunity for the Leeds assets too. Against Leicester City, they should be doing quite well, which is the next team that we are covering, the Foxes. We did hear the kind of last minute, Maddison got the yellow card, so he is out for this game week. He broke a lot of FPL players' hearts, but you've put Perez in there at that kind of right wing slot.
Yeah. Is Perez locked in at this moment in time? He's not 100%. There's a couple of ways in which Brendan Rodgers can go about setting up his team. We know that Johnny Evans is out. There's been an ongoing calf issue. There's a possibility that he could return in game week 13, but for this game week, he certainly won't be involved. That means Daniel Amati keeps his place alongside. I know this is a dodgy pronunciation, this one. I'll get this wrong as well. Sure. Ferez. Is it Ferez? Somebody will tell us Ferez, I'm going to say. Wesley Ferez. We'll see how that goes. So alongside those two. And elsewhere, look, the Leicester scene pretty much picks itself. We don't have an abundance of talent and strength and depth within that squad. So James Maddison being out for that one game is going to be a huge miss for Brendan Rodgers' men.
I'm just putting it in the comments. What is the correct pronunciation of Wesley Ferez?
I'm positive it is Ferez.
There you go. Well,
I think
maybe you're right. I'm going to put it out there. Let's see if there's maybe we should ask for wrong answers only. Just have the most outrageous ones. Right. There's been a lot of attention on this Liverpool. Give your overall update, Ben, and then we'll get to the. We'll get to some of the community questions on this.
Yeah, so we know that Diego Jota, unfortunately, he's out of the World Cup now. It didn't look great on Sunday, that calf injury, stretchered off late into the game. Jurgen Klopp reluctant to give any kind of definitive timeline. Suffice to say, we are talking months with regards to that. Spent almost 2.5 months on the sidelines recently with that hamstring problem, and I expect that at least and probably more with this latest setback. How does that affect things going forward? In terms of this front line, the one question mark I maybe see on the left-hand side, I do have Núñez But I think that I understand that the backroom staff and Jurgen Klopp have been impressed with Carvalho and his performances. So that wouldn't surprise me if he was to start in there. In midfield, I do have Thiago starting, but again, those injury problems may be in the back of Jurgen Klopp's mind when picking these 11, and Jordan Henderson could be a like-for-like replacement. I do have Trent Alexander-Arnold back. Some people were quite surprised to see him involved in the matchday squad on Sunday. There was always an outside chance. The club always had the narrative that it wasn't necessarily a serious ankle problem, and they never did rule him out. It was certain aspects of the media that were talking about a 2 to 3 week timeline. Obviously, if he starts at right back, you have Gomez sitting alongside Van Dijk. Ibrahima Konate, we know that was a muscle problem. He was a late withdrawal. He's probably around 7 to 10 days away.
So we do have a lot of questions on the Liverpool team, especially because they're showing good form at the moment. First of all, Ahmed Box has asked, who is more nailed from that back line until the World Cup, Alexander-Arnold or Robertson?
Ooh, good question as well, because we have Robertson coming off the back of his own injury. So that's fairly fresh, and he's getting himself back up to speed. And Tsimikas has been, more than an able deputy in his absence. I just think the lack of real competition on that right-hand side probably means Alexander-Arnold is more nailed. I mean, you're looking at maybe trying to shoehorn another player in to that right back spot when Trent's not there, particularly if Gomez is needed centrally.
So we do have another kind of question around this. Would you do Son to Salah as a transfer, Ben?
I own both. How about that? I mean, I said it ahead of, I think it was on Friday's stream. I talked about Salah and had a lot of questions about, should we ditch Salah? Should we get rid? And I just thought maybe on the back of that Champions League record breaking 6 minute hat trick, that was the shot in the arm. That was the confidence booster that he may have needed. Klopp has tweaked his formation, went back to a 4-2-3-1. The absence of Jota and Diaz, maybe then the emphasis is back on Salah. He becomes that main guy. And look, the way he took his goal on Sunday, I certainly wouldn't be backing against him. Is it a good move? I certainly like the fixture swing, and I certainly do fancy Salah, but I also like Tottenham, and hence that's why I own Son. Look, it's more of a gamble. I see, Son is that more consistent performer this season from what we've had. All we've had from Salah is a very good Champions League cameo and another good performance against Manchester City. So, you may want to hold back a game or so just to see how Salah settles. But like I say, I went early on it, and fortunately it paid off for me on Sunday.
So Tunji and Menheim have both asked about Gomez. Will he keep his place till the World Cup?
If he keeps on performing like he did on Sunday, then that comes down to Jurgen Klopp. And for me, absolutely 100% he does. But you then have Konate, who's coming back, who, previously you would have put him ahead of him in the pecking order. And then also Joel Matip isn't too far away. We don't have a lot of time between now and the World Cup. So it's about those players not only getting back on the training pitches, but then also getting back up to that match fitness, and getting that sharpness. But like I say, it's Joe Gomez's shirt to keep as long as he can, continue to perform at that highest level. And if he does, I think he's locked in until there's a game week 16.
Daniel has asked, any chance for Carvalho at starting?
Yeah, just touched it just at the point of the show, and it's between most definitely. Like I say, I understand that Jurgen Klopp and his backroom staff have been very impressed with Carvalho, his temperament, how he conducts himself, his performances. So this was a really 50-50 judgment call. I did go with Nunes, but like I say, I wouldn't be, it's not out the realms to see Carvalho come into that 11.
Excellent. Right, I think we've covered Liverpool questions there, so we're going to move on to No Manchester City this game week, so it's Manchester United. What is the situation for the Red Devils?
Yeah, not too much change in all honesty. Marcus Rashford, he didn't make the starting 11 at the weekend. He had been struggling, missed a couple of sessions due to illness. That's why we've seen Ronaldo. But fortunately, Rashford was fit enough to come off the bench. We also seen the absence of Christian Eriksen, again, due to illness against Newcastle. He returns to that starting 11. I do include Casemiro alongside him, even though Scott McTominay is back after serving a one-match ban. I'm not a McTominay fan, I'm afraid. And like I say, I think Casemiro will retain his place.
Yeah, I'm not a big Scott McTominay fan either. Just yeah. We'll move on to Newcastle. What's the old saying? If you haven't got anything nice to say nothing at all. So yeah, the Magpies, you guys are playing such good football at the moment. Really good attack, solid defence, and I think a lot of people have investment or belief in the team. But the big, for me as an owner of him as well, the absence of Shah from that starting 11, is that guaranteed, Ben?
Oh, this look, obviously my hometown club. Um, Maybe I'm over analyzing things here. Maybe I'm trying to second guess Eddie Howe too much. I just think, we go back to the performance at Old Trafford, and you hear from Fabian Shaw, who's been managing an ongoing foot problem, say that I'll be absolutely fine, but I couldn't walk by the end of the game and I needed to come off. We're talking a very quick turnaround here. You have the club captain and Jamal Lascelles on the bench. Do you want to be risking players who are maybe not quite at it when you've got the club captain, again, chomping at the bit to come in and play alongside Sven Botman, or even, I haven't even included Dan Burn in there either. I've got Matty Target. So I have made a few changes here, but this is more purely from a tactical standpoint, just to freshen things up. I have Joe Willock coming back in, and that again, he was benched for I think it was Joe Linton down at Old Trafford because he had been struggling with illness, and in fact he travelled down to the ground by himself away from the group. However, I've left Joe Linton in, and I've actually taken out Sean Longstaff. But look, there's not much within this, within the players within these squad, because whoever's been coming in, they have stepped up. Jacob Murphy's been great in recent games, but I have Ryan Fraser in there as well. So look, the tough calls. Bruno Guimaraes, Kieran Trippier, two players who have been, I wouldn't say struggling or suffering with fatigue, but it's certainly evident. And Eddie Howe even said, with every passing hour and every sleep, they're improving. Guimaraes would be the worry, given that he has had hamstring problems in recent times. So I do have him starting. For me, such a big player. He needs to start. And again, if he has to come off in and around that 50th, 60th minute mark, hopefully we've got the job done by then.
One question that a lot of people will be having is, obviously you mentioned it, there's been illnesses going around the club. Kieran Trippier was one. He suffered a little bit last week. With the tightness of the fixture schedule, is there any risk to him starting this game week, just from recovery reasons, so that he's not overworked, fatigued, and maybe risk of other complications?
Yeah, so he missed sessions last week, but like I say, he came through the game at Old Trafford with relative ease, maybe those latter stages. But again, it's about those post-match recovery strategies, getting yourself in the right preparation. The run Newcastle are on and the performance that we're going on, look, they'll be wanting to get back out on the pitch. Nobody will want to miss out. And, when you're winning and when you've got a really good defensive unit that we have, I think it's the best in the Premier League as it currently stands, then fatigue isn't always, it's always pushed to the back of your mind when the times are good. Like I say, even though those fixtures are coming thick and fast, you're fresh, you're energized, you want to go out, you want to get another good performance and another good result.
We do have a question from Tim Y. He said, what's Almiron's form been like this season? Jandre has said, where have you been? He's been great. And some of the data is there to back up as well. He's averaged 5 points per 90 in FPL. His expected points in FPL was about that as well, showing you that he is consistently performing well in a really good Newcastle attack as well. It's not just him, it's the whole of the team have been really, really impressive. So we're going to continue to go through because we're rounding up, getting close to finishing. Nottingham Forest, I don't know if many people are too interested in them, so just quickly fly through, Ben, any important information?
Yeah, Nico Williams was one that came back in for Serge Aurier. There you go, got that right. That was a muscular problem, not ruled out by Steve Cooper, but I certainly think Nico Williams has the edge both in terms of fitness. I've included Mangala in there. He's trained relatively well for the last couple of weeks. Steve Cooper said that he would be making changes again, given the fact that there are 3 matches. So, like I said, don't be surprised to see Forest maybe with 3 or 4 changes from last time out.
We've got the Smiths. Don't know if they're related, Sam and Bob Smith. They're saying about Castagne's fitness. They're saying, did Rodgers say that he was out this morning?
No. So we just literally jumped off the Brendan Rodgers press conference. Not aware of any issues with the fullback whatsoever. He did have an issue from game week 11, which was a heavy bang to the face, bruising around the eye, but nothing else that I'm aware of at this moment in time. But like I say, I will be posting and updating as soon as we jump off the stream.
Alfred has asked, does Aurier have any injury issues? Why is he not in the team?
Yeah, it's a muscular problem. He's playing catch up, missed a lot of pre-season. So that heavy workload on the training pitches combined with then being thrown into that starting 11 just caught up with him. Not entirely ruled out of this game, but like I say, major question marks. That's why he missed game week 11.
Southampton's another one that I don't think too many people will be invested in. So just any of the highlights and news, and then we'll get on to the next team.
Yeah, Bella Kachop, awkward landing, dislocated his shoulder. There's a possibility that he may not require surgery. They're going to see how that goes, going to treat that conservative. If he responds well, he may be back in 2 to 3 weeks. Otherwise, it could be January before he gets back for the Saints.
So let's move it to Tottenham. And once again, Kulusevski is not in the team. I think he's a big absence. And, the team have played well, Tottenham. They keep getting 3 points on the board. But I don't know if they're playing good. I'm not too impressed with them this season, although Kane is still consistently getting points. But yeah, what is the injury information there? And also, why is Kulusevski still out?
Yeah, so this is an ongoing hamstring issue. Again, it's not massive. He is working outside. He's working with aspects of the first team and certain parts of training, but he's also working with the medical department. It's something that we, regularly discuss. High re-injury, high recurrence rates, and you can't really cut any corners with this. So the concern for Conte is if we rush him back, do we then risk the possibility of a major setback, which could keep him out for a significant period? So they're just waiting for that green light from the medical department. He is there or thereabouts. Whether he makes a matchday squad midweek, it remains to be seen. Elsewhere, on the left-hand side, I have removed Ben Davies for Lenglet. Romero I have starting, but there's a possibility that Davinson Sanchez. There are changes that could be made with regards to right and left back. We've seen Perisic go on the right-hand side with Sessegnon on the left. We've also heard Antonio Conte even talk up the possibility of going with a 3-4-3 and putting Perisic up there is that third attacking player alongside Harry Kane and Heung-min Son. But for me, Basuma in there in that 3-5-2 looks the most sensible option for this game week.
And we have a question, not sure. Oh, it's DeAndre again. He says, is Doherty all right to fight for his place now?
Yeah, I mean, he obviously had those hangover from last season's knee injury that curtailed that campaign. It's took him a while to get up to full speed. Again, form hasn't been great, and he's called out by Antonio Conte in recent times. Again, question marks with regards to his fitness, but he's there now, and again, he's pushing. Is he nailed down for a start? that'll be the big question. Like I say, me and you have spoke about this lots of times before, Jason. I don't really like those Tottenham fullback positions because they are so interchangeable. We have 4, 5, possibly even 6 players who could be deployed in those, those two sort of wing back roles. So you can never be certain who's going to come in, particularly again, around these busy periods.
And I think as well, Perisic, realistically, with his age, he should be rotated through these fixtures as well. That's going to be another issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you've got to look to protect those players, those advanced. Yeah, and that wing back role in itself, the physical demands on the player, the sheer workload, and not just the distance covered, but the intensity that they're required to work. And like I say, it's difficult when asked or needed to do that 3 times a week.
So we're moving on to, West Ham. I thought I might have gone over Wolves, but they're the last one. So, West Ham, you've got Antonio back leading the line. Scamacca not up top.
Purely tactical. Again, just coming down to the number of minutes in recent times. Antonio's been out of that starting 11 due to again illness that went through that West Ham camp. So I think just an opportunity for David Moyes to freshen things. We don't have any major concerns from the weekend, although there are question marks with regards to the fitness of Zuma, who I do have starting, and also Craig Dawson picked up back-to-back dead legs. One in the league and then one in the Europa Conference. I think that's probably going to keep him out, which means that Soufal gets a reprieve and keeps his place at right back with Kehrer sitting alongside Kurt Zouma.
Yeah, we've had questions on Cresswell, Kufal, and also Emerson. So what is the realistic, likelihood of some rotation there over, I guess, the next few game weeks then? Because you said Cresswell, Kufal for this game week, but going ahead, is Emerson going to be in there? Is Kufal going to keep his place?
Well, that'll come down to because we have seen Craig Dawson partnered alongside Zuma with Kira moving out to the right hand side. So that is a possibility from David Moyes. And yeah, we've seen Emerson as well going on the left hand side. But what we have seen is Emerson's been starting in those European games, and then Cresswell's been getting the nod in the Premier League. So that's how his minutes have been managed. Look, it's very difficult to plan too far ahead. Given the high number of games that we have and suspensions, players approaching 5 yellow cards. And like I say, with this West Ham backline as it stands, picking up a lot of injuries, I think we have, like I say, at the minute, Zuma, Dawson, and also Agard, all, questionable and major doubts. Pick up another one, and then that may even force, David Moyes into a slight, formational reshuffle.
Yeah, it's one to keep an eye on. They're bubbling under the surface. Final team for this game week is Wolves. What is the situation there? And what kind of information do people need to be aware of, especially with no Diego Costa up top?
Yeah, well, we know just before his a recent appearance in that Wolves lineup, he hadn't played competitively since the back end of 2021 December. So again, the reality of the situation is he going to be starting back-to-back games in quick succession? Probably not. That's why we have He-Chan. We have Boubacar Traore coming in for his first start at the expense of Moutinho. Again, just talking about player management. And then yesterday I spoke about the potential return of Nathan Collins and whether Totti would retain his place. Totti, however, picked up a knock. He has a late fitness test. And that, for me, is enough of an opportunity just for Nathan Collins to come in and start. I have brought Semedo back in, which means Johnny switches flanks and Ait-Nouri drops out.
And Henry Save-All has said, is Zuma fit to play? Because he had the sniffles. Somebody made a joke about potential allergies. What is the situation with Kurt?
He's certainly not 100%. He has taken part in aspect of training. But of course, we still have a little bit of time between now and kickoff, which is why I have included Zuma. But as it currently stands, is he 100%? The answer would have to be no.
Well, there you go. That is the end of today's stream. As always, we have these just before the deadline of every game week. So just make sure to stay subscribed. And if you do have any more questions, you can tweet us. You can put in the comments box below and we will try our best. But it's really hectic at the moment. You know, the midweek, then weekend, it's kind of crazy for us, but we'll do our best. But as always, it has been a pleasure to chat to you all, to answer your questions. And we will see you again very, very soon. And yeah, Ben, you've got to go back and